Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
All right, so last episode, we talked all about this concept of servant leadership. You admitted that you had had maybe a little bit of frustration with your counterpart, your associate. And I kept thinking throughout that episode, we've got to do an episode on the psychology behind giving and receiving feedback, because I feel like ultimately all that we talked about last episode will culminate in some type of conversation with your associate, and I feel like it'd be super helpful to you and all of our listeners to take a deep dive into feedback.
So I absolutely agree, and I think I've talked multiple times on this podcast about how I used to give feedback one way and it blew up in my face, how I've evolved, but I still struggle with it. And then, we talked last episode about, what's been going on in the drama world. And so, certainly friction with the associate is one thing, but then friction amongst the team and certain things that have been coming up there. And so us needing to have conversations and give and take feedback there. Personalities tie into that. So it's like this web, whatever.
It's huge.
But it's been certainly helpful. I even went back and I listened to 2 podcasts we did, the first year we did podcasts. This was a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Found it super helpful for myself to go back and be like, oh yeah, okay. Because the personalities have kind of helped, knowing that has helped how I've approached some of these. So let's talk, and then maybe I'll give you some examples of that.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that would be super helpful if you could, I keep tasking you, I'm finding myself tasking you with tasks, between the, go talk to these other doctors about goals, or come back and tell us about, what was the other one, about how to fine tune our schedule.
Yes.
I don't want to forget, because I think the last episode the goal was to talk about leadership, and then we kind of got stuck on one leadership style. Can you, at some point, maybe talk about other leadership styles that do work? Because you said the servant one is not very common. And I certainly didn't set out to be a servant leader. And so what are the other styles and types? What are the pros and cons? So if you don't mind coming back and doing another episode on that at some point, so we don't leave people hanging.
Yeah. I will definitely do that.
But I think feedback, especially now, because I think you said to me earlier, we've just talked about all these episodes with our goal setting, and a lot of that goes back to how do we communicate things to our team to help us achieve these goals, and we get stuck and going, well, I don't know how to say that to so-and-so effectively, or some of the things that in my office that have been bubbling up amongst the team. Now more than ever, we've had the front versus the back, and God bless, it's irritating, it's counterproductive, inefficient, wearing me out. And so I recently did have a lot of feedback meetings, and I think they went pretty well. I mean, I guess I just did them, so let's see what happens. Maybe half the team doesn't show up next week. I don't know. But I do think, I think this topic is going to be super helpful.
It's critical, especially coming off all of the goal setting. To me, we've spent all this time at the end of the year reflecting and getting ready to goal set, and what does the practice need to do? Well, your team is critical in whether or not you achieve your goals, and they can become a distraction to those goals. If there's a lot of drama, it can get us off course.
Absolutely. That's what I'm feeling right now with all the friction between me and what's his name and me and the team. I'm just y'all are all wearing me out. There are days where I'm I just don't even want to be here.
Yeah.
Because y'all are getting on my nerves. I just want to do patient care and get out of here. But I can't do the patient care and meet the goals without you people. So
we got to have the team on board. And I will say too, this whole feedback conversation that we're about to have, 100% your team members need to know how to give and receive feedback. Because to me, this is not just the doctor to the employees or the doctor to the associates. We do our best when we are receiving feedback from our teammates as well. We need to know as a teammate how to give feedback. We need to know as a teammate how to receive feedback. So as you all are listening to this episode, we need to have a clear understanding that when I'm talking about this method of giving feedback, this applies to everybody across the board.
And I don't think I told you this before, but so I think what happened, and again, I've not had the conversation because I've been hiding from it, and I actually put it in associates court to be like, okay, you've got something to say, you set it up, like you come find me.
Yeah.
And I think what happened is there were certain things that were not sitting well with me, that I knew if I said them, that he would take them very defensively, and I didn't want that to happen. So I kind of wrapped it up in some goals that I wanted him to kind of think about. Now, I, not being the wise person you are, I was not thinking about it as his leadership impact, because that's really what it boiled down to. Hence the last week's episode. And I think it didn't work, because now he's getting this list of things that I kind of globalized, and he doesn't know what to do with that. He's like, what the hell do you mean by I need to do this or that? Yeah. And so now he's kind of frustrated with me because I think he thinks I'm picking on him. Yeah. And I guess, truth be told, I guess I am picking on him. But anyway, if you go back to the last episode, you'll kind of see why, because I feel like I'm up against this timeline, blah, 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 like back and forth. Anyway, so fast forward to one of the things, you were in my office while I was out of town, and you were talking and giving and taking feedback from the team.
Yeah.
When you gave me the highlights of those, there were certain things that came out in it that I was like, okay, I can't just let this sit. Like, I've got to dig deeper and nip some of these things in the bud. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have drama. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, so it was very helpful that you were able to data gather for me. And when I went into these meetings then, I inadvertently, like, it wasn't on the schedule for me to follow up. But again, some of the things that you uncovered, I was like, okay, I can't hide from this anymore. I've got to be able to take and give feedback and really like get us to move forward, because we're in a point of a lot of drama simmering in the pot right now. So we ended up having a day that was going to be really slow. I almost took the day off, and then I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to come in and have these meetings, which I dread, but I was like, I got to do it. I can't keep hiding from these anymore. So I went in and I had these meetings, but I made sure, and I honestly was only going to meet with like 2 or 3 people based on the feedback you gave me. And then I was like, no, I need to make sure that I'm opening myself up to feedback too, which I hate. I too don't want to be criticized, but I need to do that, because if I'm missing something, if I'm the cause of a lot of this strife, like maybe I didn't do anything, but maybe that's the problem. Maybe I'm not doing anything. Yeah. And I need to be like, you know. So I ended up pulling everybody in, and I ended up kind of going, hey, this is and the day before, because again, it was so last minute, the day before I kind of sent a message out on our group thread, and I was like, if you have anything that I need to be aware of, that I need to work on, that I'm not giving you. Now, of course, being honest, who's going to come and say, yeah, you're the problem, you know, yeah, lady who pays him a paycheck, but I know some of them would. Maybe not everybody, but 1 or 2 would be like, Kuba, I need this from you. Or it's because you said this that person interpreted as that. Or you weren't consistent with, you know, you made these 2 team members do this, but when that one didn't show up, you gave her grace. You got to quit doing that. Like, I just wanted to make sure the door was open to receive feedback. In the end, I didn't really receive anything. So I might need to come back full circle, or maybe I need to have you come back full circle next time you're there to say, hey, you know, you didn't give it to her then. You had very short notice. Is there anything you need me to tell her?
Right.
And maybe you did that already in the initial set of meetings, but...
Yeah. I think it's I call that pull feedback, when we're actually seeking out feedback from somebody else. It's one of my favorite versions, actually, of feedback. And it's something we don't do hardly at all, because at the end of the day, it is hard to hear, or we don't want to hear it. But it's really interesting that our brain actually receives that information better. When we've asked for feedback from somebody, our natural human fight or flight response, defensive response, stays quiet, because we asked for that.
It's like we were mentally ready for it, rather than being assaulted by it.
We were mentally ready. And so to me, it's one of the easiest ways. I always tell people, I just did a training on this this last week with a team, because we're calling it the year of feedback. We are going to get, in this particular team, we're going to get really comfortable giving and receiving feedback. And my big takeaway for them was, if you haven't received feedback from a team member that week, ask for it. Turn around and ask somebody, hey, did you just hear that conversation with that parent? Like, what are your thoughts on it? What could I have done better in that situation? I don't feel like it went well. What is your perspective? Or as simple as, hey, can you watch me, set up this tray, because I feel like I'm not near as fast as my counterpart. What am I doing that's slowing the process down? Can you just watch me on this? So if we'll get really good at pull feedback, first of all, we just become that much sharper. We just become a better employee or a better worker. But then also we become very accustomed to receiving feedback, so that when we are assaulted with it, our response is usually better to it, because we're in the habit of receiving feedback. I do want to dive into a method of giving feedback. This works from, again, practice owner to Sweet Sally at the front to my 12-year-old daughter, which I follow this method with. So there is a 4-part series, and there's a YouTube video on this that summarizes it beautifully. I'll play the video all the time. It's literally like 5 minutes. I'll put it in the notes to this episode. But step 1 of giving feedback, to get the person's brain ready, essentially, to be assaulted with this information, is you ask what's called a micro yes question. So it may sound something like this: I have a few thoughts on that last patient interaction. Could I share them with you? Or, hey, I have some feedback on some efficiency things for you. Would it be okay if I share those with you? Or, wow, I don't think that went really well. Could I share a few thoughts with you? Or could we work on this together? Something that allows the counterpart to say, yes, I would love to talk with you about this. I always use my 12-year-old daughter as an example on this, but if I assault, it used to be that she just, yes, mommy, whatever information I gave her, it was, yes, thank you, like so receptive to any kind of feedback that I gave her. And then there came a point in time where she hit that preteen point where if I assaulted her with unsolicited feedback, it was like weeping and gnashing of teeth. You don't understand me. I'm, you just don't get me, right? And so if I will, it's worked 100% of the time. If I will lead with a micro yes question, the conversation always goes well. Always, 100% of the time, because her brain is ready to hear what I'm about to share with her. So a micro yes question is step 1.
You've actually, I think, now that you're saying this, and I started doing it and then I dropped it. I need to pick back up with it again, but excuse me, even with patients,
yes,
and going over treatment, and you're about to deliver like this news that your kid needs,
yep,
8 crowns, and you're like, hey, I'm noticing some things here. May I share with you some of my findings here?
Yeah.
And I can think of one patient in particular that I was like, ugh, I don't want to go in there, but that's how I started it, and it went very smooth.
Yeah. Because the brain, it's so interesting. The brain views it as a social threat if something's just presented to them, hard information is presented, especially feedback. We just go into automatic defense mode, and then we don't hear the message at all. Whereas if they've said yes, they've agreed to the conversation, that defense mode stays squashed down.
Okay, so what if you get a no? Like if your daughter said, I don't want to hear it, or the patient says,
So
like, what do you do then?
Well, with my daughter, it's pretty easy, because then it's like, okay, when will you be ready? I will say she's never said no to this point. But a team member, let's say you're like, hey, I want to share some feedback with you on that last patient interaction. Can we talk about a few things? And they're like, ooh, I'm not in a mental space right now to hear that information. Okay, no problem. When do you think will be a better time? Is there any way that we could do it at the end of the day? Yeah, that'll work for me. Or no, I got to run out at the end of the day. Tell you what, why don't we approach it first thing in the morning? Would that work better for you? So the person really does have to be in a mental space. And if they just had a patient interaction that they're like pulling their hair out, they're having to step outside to catch air, now is not the time to approach them with feedback.
So I'm also thinking of like a staff member of mine right now who she is very more than happy to give her thoughts on everything. And it's funny because she's relatively young. I think she thinks she's very experienced, but she's relatively young in the assisting spectrum of being an assistant. She knows a lot, but she's very quick to share her wisdom. And a lot of the other team members are like, get out of my face. Like, and so I can see her sometimes. She's tried this and people are kind of like, because they just don't want to hear from her. What do you do in that situation?
Yeah, which is funny enough because I just talked with said employee about this, and to me,
you know who I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
No, I know.
Okay.
Very clearly. And so I just spoke with her because that real, I'm the smartest one in the room. Let me tell you this. Let me tell you this. When they've kind of burned their bridges on saying their opinion too much, they need to kind of go back and recover from that. And that's where we switch to, like we talked about last week, where we approach people with a curiosity. What do they know? Tell me your perspective on this. Or I'd love to, I do this way, but I've noticed you do it that way. I'm curious. Why do you do it that way? I'd love to learn your method. So she needs to have a period of time where she's recovering and where people begin to view her as safe again, which means she's asking a lot of curious questions and valuing what they say. And so anyway, if you're the type of person that's always giving your opinion, you may have to stop that for a period of time to regain the respect of your teammates.
And to be determined if she's going to do that or not.
Yeah, we'll see. That's hard. That's hard when that's not your default mode. So step 1, micro yes. Step 2, which to me is the hardest point of the whole equation, is data points, is what they're called. I call them facts. The best way to describe it is don't talk about, I feel like you did this, or one of the, like, again, relating back to a 12-year-old kid, if I'm like, hey, you overreacted to that situation. That means nothing. That is such a blurry concept. What does overreacted even mean? The way I might describe overreacted could be very different from the way that my 12-year-old describes overreacted. So instead of using flowery concepts, we use facts, actual points that I can equate to. So, hey, Cosette, my 12-year-old daughter, can I share a few thoughts with you on how you just interacted with your brother? Okay, yeah, sure, Mom. Okay, so he took your toy and ran off with it, and I could tell that made you mad. You then decided to yell at him. You started to cry. And then you ran after him, intending to hit him with whatever was in your hand. All of those were an overreaction. Those are data points, very factual things. And yes, it can lead to that was an overreaction to the situation. But we don't lead with you overreacted. We lead with the data points. So even as we've talked about conversations that you have with people or need to have with people, we're bringing it back to, no, talk about this example, because those are the facts of the situation and there's no feeling involved in those.
And I think that's where I was getting kind of bogged down with my associate conversation, because I was like, there are facts, but a lot of it is how I feel about that. And I can't go to him with what I feel because that's just what I feel.
Yeah.
And he could take it or leave it or be like, you're crazy or you're worrying or you're anxious for no reason. So I think for me, for example, him coming in a little bit later, right? Like huddles at 7:05. I usually arrive there about 7:15, 7:20, and he kind of rolled in there. He started doing that, and it was starting to irritate me. And I think one of the things that I was able to go back and say was, well, here's the problem. When you're not showing up early enough, if they have a question from huddle, like, what x-rays are we taking on this patient, or Mom scheduled for this but the notes say that, they don't have anybody to ask at that point, so that can create a lot of tension in the morning when there's not a doctor around. I forgot my other example. So those are things that, like the one day where we were having really bad weather, and now typically he does the operative unless it's a Cuba only patient. Well, it wasn't. So we had an op patient, but then we also had a limited exam patient, and we also had pair of siblings that were Cuba only patients. So to me, you're rolling late. I haven't heard from you. And now it's not just me whining about you being late. It's really like put a lot of stress on me to go, where do I need to be? Because I'm needing to be in 4 different places at the same time right now. And I'm trying to troubleshoot where I'm going. Mm-hmm. I don't even have time to figure out where you are. And so we joked about it. And I think his takeaway was, you mama bear worrying about, am I dead in a ditch? And I'm like, well, jokes aside, I do worry about that, about all my employees, like, because it's raining hard outside. And you're right. That might be me being emotional, me being a mama going, oh, is my baby dead in a ditch? And you may be like, mom, get over it.
Yeah.
But the more, I think the part he missed was me going, okay, but you've now created anxiety for me because I don't, like, objectively, I don't know where to start in my day. And now I'm having to troubleshoot a problem because you weren't here and you didn't relay. So it's like I had to pause a minute before I talked to him about being late, because I think my initial was like, well, you're late.
Yeah.
And to him, he's like, pfft.
Yeah.
But when I was able to give him facts to go, but do you see why that caused me anxiety? It wasn't just me being anxious to be anxious, which part of it was that.
Yeah.
But the other part was literally, here's some facts. I've got these 4 patients here at the same time. What would you like me to do about that right now? And then he was able to say, okay,
I see
your point.
See it.
Or now, not only do I have those 4 to deal with at the same time, but now I've had 2 different team members come to me, mom with this call, and that chart note doesn't make sense. And I've got 6 problems on my hand that I thought I was going to have a partner here helping me troubleshoot all this, but you've rolled in late.
Right.
So I think that's what helped me make the conversation more productive rather than
So
me just
helpful.
nagging at you being late.
Because otherwise it can come across as what you're talking about is the impact. So it goes micro yes, data points. The third step is impact. So from those facts, how did it impact me, the feedback giver? How did it impact the team, the situation? And oftentimes what we do is we go straight, first of all, we skip the micro yes, and we go straight to, you made this kind of blurry mistake that I haven't really described, and here's how it impacted me. We jump straight to the impact. Well, then it just feels like that person's perspective or that person's feelings, or hey, that's your problem. Which it's not, but because we didn't go in a very clear order and we led with the impact rather than the facts, it feels personal. So you're describing it exactly the way it should go. Hey, do you have a few minutes so I can talk with you about when to arrive? Sure. Here are the facts. You were late. We didn't know where you were. You didn't communicate to anybody. We had these 4 patients. It was, in my mind, I had planned for you to take the operative, but you weren't here. I didn't know where you were. None of the team members knew where you were. Therefore, impact. I got really anxious because I was worried about you. I really did worry that something had happened to you. So I wasn't thinking clearly for the rest of my patients because I was too worried about you. I was trying to figure out, do I need to step into the operative and get that started? But if I do that, then that means you're going to be stepping into hygiene, which there's some Cuba onlys over there, so that won't work. I was having trouble communicating to the team what to do because I couldn't build a plan, which then delayed us getting patients seated and started because I couldn't come up with a plan. Right? Those are all impact statements. And again, even as we describe them, they're non-feeling, right? We said, yes, I was anxious, but it wasn't like I felt like I was alone. I didn't have anybody there with me. I was overwhelmed and didn't know what to. No, we're not going there. There was a clear impact to the associate being late, and here are all of the impacts, and it feels very factual.
So I will tell you, I did not handle it right, honestly, because, and I think that's probably what's led to some of the grievances I talked about last week in the episode, because I skipped the micro yes, and I think I did. I jumped straight to feeling. I'm like, dude, you're late, and now I'm stressed.
Yeah.
And so, of course, who's laid back guy, is like, it'll be fine. See, that's actually what he hit me with. He was like, I'm not late. It was just fine. I walked in right in time to step into the op. Like, they've already got it set. I'm not late. How am I late? Like, they're teed up and ready to go. Which irritated me because I was like, you have missed the whole foolery that you have, right? And so then I had to go back later and then I had to say, hey, well, you being late, then now I didn't know where to go.
Right.
So for me, I think that was the taste that left in both of our mouths. I would say for me, I was like, jerk, like you're brushing me off right now and you're making me feel like a drama queen, and I am not a drama queen. It is your fault for being a dude and rolling in, and how dare you, right? And from his viewpoint, he's just like, I really don't get what the problem was.
Right.
And so I think that's the taste we all left with. And if I had handled it right the first time, because then later I thought about it and I thought about all of this, and then I had to go back and point out some of the facts, and then he was like, oh, okay, you're right. But by that point it was too late. Like, I feel like a nagging mom and a drama queen. And then that has escalated to a few other things that happen that I think I've already set the tone for him thinking I'm picking on him and being drama.
Right.
And me going, how are you not catching any of this? Like, are you that, much of a dude that you can't? So anyway, I think this is very important.
Yes. Like,
but it's hard to process in the moment. Like, to defend myself, I guess I would say it's hard for me to process in the moment that that's what I was feeling.
Yeah.
All I knew is I felt this overwhelming anxiety, so that's what I was communicating. I feel overwhelmed and anxious. It's your fault for not being here. And, of course, then he's like, just cut it out, you crazy lady. So I think all the things you just said, like, this caused this, and I was anxious, but I was anxious because this, like, in retrospect, all of that makes so much sense. But I think in the moment, it was all feeling. So I guess that's where I've got to start. My go-to needs to be trying to figure out the facts first.
Yes.
And then figuring out the impact, and then not forgetting the micro yes.
Yeah. I think that's key, because then it allows that person to regulate, hey, I'm about to receive some information. And leading with the facts, yes, it psychologically makes the most sense, but also because it's fact-based, oftentimes the person receiving that information, we're starting with something that we can mutually agree upon. The facts are the facts. And we've got to be careful with that, because we don't want to skew the facts or throw wrong facts in there or add tone to those facts, right? So this, you came in late. That's a fact. But maybe it's not. Maybe he thought late was anything past 7:20. And your perspective was, if you're walking in past 7:15, then you're late. So maybe we're even off on that. But you were late because you came in at 7:24. And I expected for you to be here at 7:15. Because you walked in at 7:24 instead of 7:15, blah, 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 blah. So when we start with the facts, usually those are things that we're like, we both see the exact same thing. And then we move on to the impact, which the person receiving the feedback is usually completely unaware of the impact. They're aware of the facts, but they're unaware of the impact. So that is new information. And if we lead with completely new information, it's like we're speaking two different languages until we talk enough to get back down to, oh, okay, now we're on the same page. But that takes a lot of extra communication when really we shouldn't have to do that.
And we may not even get to that communication if now you're pissed off and now you quit listening, you storm out of the room or whatever it is.
Yep.
I think the other thing, I like what you're saying about this gathering the facts first, or at least mentally thinking through the facts myself, because that's where I do find I'm like, that's the way I perceived it in the moment, but actually when I'm looking at the schedule, that's not what was fact.
Right.
It's like maybe I thought that was fact, but it wasn't. Or if I was in your shoes, how would I take being told this? Did you know you were the operative person? And in our case, yeah, he knows he is. So, but things like that, like I think it helps me make sure, because my go-to is that dramatic impact.
Yeah.
It's the feel, right? And so if I can get through the facts first, I find that I have a much better conversation.
Yes.
Because I myself have been able to weed through what is my emotion versus what is fact.
It helps you check yourself.
Yeah.
Before you engage in a potentially consequential conversation.
In which a lot of times I come out looking like a fool. If I did not go through the facts, I come out with the emotion, then I'm pointed out something like, well, Kuba, you're the one who said 7:20 was our start time. Ah, crap. You're right. I did say that. Right. You know, like things like that that I can kind of go back to and say, wait. Where's my culpability in this? Mm-hmm. And then I can, you know.
I think that's such a good point. The facts are going to make us regulate ourselves, too, in the process. And then the fourth part is asking a question of feedback from them. So, you know, hey, do you have a few minutes to talk about this morning? Sure. Okay, so you walked in at 7:24, which in my book is late. I expected you here at 7:15 because we had operative here. Because you were late, it led to, first of all, you know, I didn't know where to go on the schedule, whether to step into operative and which would mean then you would have hygiene, but there were some Cuba onlys over there. So I didn't know if maybe we should make the operative wait. I was trying to make a lot of decisions. The team was looking to me to make a decision. All this time, I'm worried about you. I felt worried that you might have had a wreck or something might have happened. I needed to take a minute to reach out to you, make sure you were okay, which then delayed us making decisions. We ended up seating the operative late. We got started on hygiene late. And it just overall was chaotic. It created a chaotic morning. And that's not a good way to start the day. Can you give me your thoughts on it? So that final question ropes them into the conversation so that it feels like a dialogue rather than I'm going to vomit a bunch of information on you and walk away. You're going to have time to respond. Now, for those of you embarking on this type of feedback for the first time and you haven't given feedback like this before, what may happen is during the fact and the impact section, the person that's receiving this information may try to jump in and interrupt on their perspective on things. If you've never ended with what is your thoughts on things, then they are going to feel like their only opportunity is to interrupt in the conversation, which can throw the whole step off. So just know you've got to train the person that's receiving this information to know that they will always have an opportunity to respond, and you've got to stick to that so that eventually you can settle into the 4-step part without interruption, which is the goal. If you're doing it for the first time, then and the person interrupts, just go, I really want to hear your thoughts. If I could finish kind of getting through the information, I promise you I'm going to ask your perspective on it, because you want to be able to get through the series without interruption. So always end with a feedback question or looping them in somehow.
So you're saying you trained with the team with these steps. How did that go? Like, how did they take the talk on feedback?
So what's interesting is in this particular team, I think it's so important because there's been a lot of dramatic reactions to feedback on the team, unnecessarily dramatic reactions to feedback. So we actually had a practice session where each person had to sit with each member of their team and they had to give feedback in this four-part series, because what I wanted to happen, this is an out-of-town client, so we have like an all-day training, and I wanted them to leave that session that day, first of all, having given feedback 7 different times to all of their to all of their team members, having received feedback 7 different times, and then also to get comfortable with the 4-step part. And it's so interesting, before we started this, it was all out dread. I am talking like the lady sitting closest to me, she was like, this is dumb. I cannot believe we're doing this. Like, I do not want to do this. I'm like, I know, but you're going to. We're going to do this. And by the end of it, she sat there and she was like, how do you do this? She was like, because you knew we needed this. And this was so helpful. She was like, I can't even tell you, like, I will use this not only in the team, but at home. Like, this process was so helpful. Like, how do you know to do this? I'm like, you just got to trust me. I promise there's always a point. So she was one of the most vocal that was like, I'm not going to do this. She went through it. And at the end of it, she's like, this was very helpful. So I think you've just got to accept that this is psychologically proven. There is backing to this that shows that it works. You've got to trust the process enough to actually do it, and then just start trying it.
So how did you know they needed this? I mean, like, I guess all of us need it.
We all need it. Okay. I feel like every team could benefit from this. But in this particular team, I feel like the doctor tries to give feedback, and he is so kind, like such a kind person. But I think he's got some personalities on the team that are feelers. They receive this information, and it's just like, all of a sudden we're at 392 degrees and we're boiling hot. And now, because of our natural defensive reactions, I'm not even talking to the doctor for the rest of the week. I'm giving him the cold shoulder because he affronted me with this feedback. And so I felt like it was the type of situation that was starting to cripple them, that they were to a point where the doctor was cautious about every word that he said because he was worried it would light a fire that was going to burn him the rest of the week. And I think because he's holding back on feedback, the team also is not giving feedback to him. So it was starting to stifle communication, and
that's interesting, because I thought you were about to say it was all amongst team members.
No.
Which is also funny because, and maybe this has happened and I never recognized it, but I think what's gotten me so worked up about the associate situation is he has not been communicating with me. And I don't think I've ever had anybody do that. I'm like, I've worked with women my whole life, and it's never been one of the women who's doing it to me. It's the dude. And so I think that, like, now that you're saying it, I think that's what's gotten me even more going, are you kidding me? Like, you're giving me one-word answers right now?
Yeah.
What grade are we in? And maybe it is, I don't know, maybe females have done it to me and I haven't picked up on it, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
It is interesting.
Makes me feel better then, that it's like, because I'm like, this is doctor to doctor, none of my, anyway. But
I do think there's a gender component to it that's super relevant here. Because, again, not all females, but a lot of females tend to go straight to the impact section. And we live in that impact world. Emotionally, this is what it did to me. And we want to talk about problems through the lens of impact rather than the other way. Let's talk about the facts and then how it impacted. And so I think males tend to reject that, right? If we start with feelings, the facts are absolutely irrelevant by the time we get to them. And we can even think, I mean, like, my husband and I have walked through this cycle so many times, and I've learned if I do not start with a very factual representation of what bothered me, and I just go to the fact, I'm irritated and this made me mad because you did X, Y, and Z, it is cats and dogs every time. Because men tend to go, she's just being irrational, she's just being dumb, she must be that time of the month, she's hormonal. They tend to dismiss because females tend to communicate out of the impact, and that means absolutely nothing to them.
Which I think is exactly what I've done, and hence now I'm frustrated because I feel dismissed.
Yeah. So I think if we could all, teammates, to me, this process of being able to give feedback, how many times are we sitting next to a teammate that did something a certain way or said something a certain way, and we're like, ooh, that didn't go well, but we don't give the feedback in the moment because we're not comfortable with giving feedback. We feel like we're going to hurt that person's feeling, or we spend so much time thinking about how would I say it, that by the time we get through thinking about how we would say it, the moment has passed and we're like, it's too much trouble. To me, if we could get comfortable with this process and just in the moment, feedback does not have to be, let's schedule time to set aside and give people give team members time to give it. It should be in the moment, right then and there. Like a conversation went bad and we're like, hey friend, can I share my thoughts on that situation that just happened with the parent? Sure. Yeah. I'd love to hear your thoughts. The parent kept asking the same question over and over. And I think she asked it 3 different times, the same question, and you answered the exact same way 3 times. I think what was happening is she was not understanding your response, and you should have changed your response each time. When she kept asking the question, you should have said it differently, because she was asking the same question again and again, and you answering it the same way wasn't helpful, and it led to the mom being really frustrated. And once she was frustrated, she wasn't even listening to you at all. So I would say next time, if a parent asks a question second time in a row, you should kind of think to yourself, ooh, she must not be understanding my answer. Do you have any thoughts on that? Right? That's in the moment, just right then and there. And if we've got a dynamic on our team that's really good at receiving feedback, because we're doing it the right way and we're doing it with this good strategy in mind, it should be that feedback happens daily amongst team members. But that is very rare. I do not see many teams that do that well.
So now, after watching these 7 give and take, 7 and 7, did anything come out of that?
Yes.
I mean, like, any drama come out of that? Like somebody who was like, oh, I wasn't expecting you to say this about me, or I wasn't expecting.
No. And everybody, so once we ended that session, I asked, what's your personal takeaway? After hearing from your teammates and your doctor, what are your personal takeaways from the feedback?
Do you think people were honest?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Sorry, and their response was...
And practical things came out of it. Like, not just, I need to focus on this, or I didn't realize that I take on too much and then I get stressed, and then when I delegate, I do it badly. It was not only that, like, okay, I realized that, but what I need to do, what one team member told me is, I need to, immediately when I know my plate's full and something is given to me, I need to right then pass the task off rather than waiting until the end of the day. So it was like it led to practical takeaway, not just like, this is who I am, I need to be aware of this, but this is actually a system that I need to do differently. So I think it was very...
So nobody had hurt feelings, drama. Mm-mm. The doctor felt better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And maybe becoming a team of really good feedback, maybe it starts with a session like that. Maybe if we are so not good at that, we may need to set aside a long lunch break or a half day to go, hey guys, let's get comfortable with feedback. And maybe we just do a deep dive into, we're gonna pair up, we're gonna partner up, we're gonna follow this, feedback series, and we're gonna get good at it right now. And maybe that is the starting point. But I don't think it has to be necessarily.
Is this the one you said that there's a good YouTube on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'll put the good YouTube video in the notes, so it'll be a good summary of this.
Because for me, what's coming at you. Next time you're in my office, Bethany, we're doing this with my team.
I'm ready.
I'm thinking about people who, are on their own. So probably watch the YouTube. Maybe watch the YouTube as a group.
Yep.
And then get comfortable with
and then practice it. Because it's one thing to talk about it in theory. It's another thing to actually practice the 4 steps and get comfortable with them.
I mean, my bile is rising thinking about this. Like, I'm thinking like the woman who sat next to you going, oh God, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sitting here going, that's why I'm asking you all these questions. Like, are you sure everybody left okay? Did you have to have like extra tissues involved? You didn't have to break up any fights?
No. There was not one tissue that came out. It really is. It's interesting because it works. This 4-part series, it really does. It neutralizes feedback in such a way that you hear the core of the message. You hear the point, and somehow, because of this process, your feelings are not aroused by it. So it works. And not that it won't go badly at times. I'm not saying it's 100% foolproof, but I always say, if it works on a preteen daughter, and this is the method that I employ with her almost every single time, and when I don't, it goes badly. And so I think if it can work on a 12-year-old girl, I think it can work on just about anybody.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.